Hello, and welcome to SingleStore. My name is Joe Carlson, and I'm a developer advocate here at SingleStore. In this video today, together we're going to set up a brand new SingleStore cluster. Next, we're going to import over 20 million rows of sample e-commerce data from an AWS S3 bucket, and then we're going to run some sample queries on that data set. It's the easiest way to get started with SingleStore. Okay, so now we know what we're building. But I want to ask you, what do you think is the best way to learn a new skill or technology? Or maybe a new database? For me, I learn best when I'm building a brand new application with that technology. And I would highly encourage you to follow along with me to get a guided tour as we set up a new SingleStore application in under 5 minutes. So be sure to check out the code in the snippets linked below if you want to follow along. Now, if you're new to SingleStore, no worries. SingleStore is a distributed, scale-out, general-purpose SQL database, and it's designed to have the versatility to run both analytical and operational workloads with great performance. And if you didn't know what any of that meant, no worries, no worries. Basically, it just means that if you need the fastest SQL database to handle data-intensive applications, SingleStore is the database for you. Okay, are you ready to get started? Let's go. Okay, let's set up a cluster together. So I already have a cluster set up for us today, but if you need to make a brand new one, hit the Create Database Cluster button in the upper right-hand corner. You can set up with all the default settings. I suggest just using the free trial here. You'll be fine. One thing to note here, though, is with SingleStore, you can set up your database cluster to live on AWS, GCP, or Azure. I'm going to be using AWS today, but whatever you feel most comfortable with. Great. Or wherever your data or applications already live. Okay, so we have our cluster created. We have some basic information about it. One thing to note, you will have to add your IP address of where you're accessing that data from. So go in there, make sure you add that to the allow list. There's a nice little feature on here just to add my current IP address. My IP address is already added, but you will have to do that before we get started here. Okay, in addition to being able to get an overview of your cluster, you can actually use this thing called the SQL Editor, and it allows us to run SQL commands on our clusters, like we're using it from a local IDE, right? It's just connected straight up to our clusters in our database. And using that code I linked in the description below, we're going to first create a database and a table. So what I want to do is highlight this, and then we hit this Run button over here. So that's going to create a brand new database that lives on our cluster, and it's going to create a table for us in there as well. Nothing's in there yet, but in this next step, what we're going to do is we're going to create a pipeline. And a pipeline is basically a way for us to ingest data from another source. We have we have 5 CSV files stored in a AWS S3 bucket. You can see that linked here. It's actually 5 months worth of user-generated data from a sample e-commerce store. In this case, it's a cosmetic store. So let's say you're an application developer and your boss asks you to pull in this information and start making some insights from this data that's located in here. So we have these are all user-generated events from the browser. They're all time-stamped. They're labeled with what the action was. They're linked with the user that's associated with them, the item that they're used for, the prices associated with those items, and some other unique information as well. But we have 20 million rows of data stored across 5 months worth of events in these separate CSV files, and we're going to be importing that into our SingleStore cluster. So first we're going to do is create a pipeline. So that's going to allow us to connect to it. Great, that looks like that succeeded. And the next thing we're going to do is run that pipeline. So this is going to take a couple seconds to load because remember, it's loading in about 20 million rows of data. So we're going to let that run, and once that's set to go, we're going to confirm that all the data is in fact stored in our cluster. And we can do that by just doing a little sample query to show us how many events were actually ingested into our database on SingleStore. So we still have 0. That means it's still being loaded in. Not a worry. It should be done soon. But that's a lot of events, and it's still going to run pretty quickly. There we go. All done. So you can see here we have all of our events accounted for on our cluster. Okay, next thing we're going to do is I just want to see that sample data, make sure that it is in fact in the right shape. And as expected, we can see the first 100 rows of data being pulled in, and they're labeled in our database as expected. Okay, so let's say we have this data in here. Great, but we want to start running some analytics based on holiday traffic. Like, how does the holidays affect the traffic of our clusters? So the first thing we're going to do is make a reference table for all the holidays that we want to start tracking. And we're going to insert into that New Year's, Christmas, Martin Luther King Day, Independence Day, and we want to see how those work. So we just created that brand new table, imported that data, and let's just make sure that that works. Great, that is loaded in there. Okay, so next let's find out which holiday has the most activity. So we're just going to run the SQL command here. That's going to find out which holidays have the most events. Where's the most traffic happening on our website? Okay, looks like we have a result returned from our query. Some interesting insights. Unsurprisingly, Thanksgiving or probably Black Friday is generating the most amount of traffic according to our analytics. But what is kind of surprising here is that Veterans Day and Martin Luther King Day are showing more traffic results than Christmas Day, which actually, when you think about it, kind of does make sense since not many people are actually shopping on Christmas, but I'm still kind of surprised that Veterans Day and Martin Luther King Day is generating more events than Christmas. And there you have it. We have a bunch of other sample queries you can play around with this data set if you want in the description below in those code snippets. But if you want to follow along or try out some other projects, check out developer.singlestore.com. And also check out our community forums. If you get stuck, need help, want direction, want to talk through some of your problems, it's the best place to get your answers resolved or your questions resolved on the SingleStore forums. Besides that, we hope you have a ton of fun. Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more walkthroughs like this. And we'll see you next time. Bye.